Spaghetti westerns had begun well before Sergio Leone. Germans and so forth wrote westerns, even though none of them had ever been to the American West. There was a kind of a European tradition, and the Italians came along, and so they started making these pictures, often using slightly broken down American stars, or stars like Clint, who were on the rise. It was a very unpretentious, I guess is the polite way of putting it, genre. I mean, it was mainly made for Europe. And I think Leone's were really the first to make any kind of impact in the United States. They were looked on askance because they so violated the long American tradition of how Western stories were told. It was one of the things that Clint once said to me about it. It's what he liked about it. They were breaking all the rules.
Leone is the only director of spaghetti westerns that made it in America. By the way, there were dozens. I produced a spaghetti western myself. There were dozens of them, but almost all of them never played in America. Only Leone pictures, because he was artful. He was very, very clever in the making of his movies. He made them feel like real, important pictures by the way he shot it and the kind of characters he used.
The westerns done by other directors at that time were cheap films. I was the one who started the Italian westerns, and my films were cheap too. The ones before Sergio Leone. So there was no outstanding Western director better than Sergio Leone at that time, and even later, because the Western genre was considered as something cheap, not worth doing it, while Sergio Leone loved them, and I loved the Western.
We were doing very small budget films. This wasn't the high budget Italian film. The first A Fistful of Dollars was a $200,000 film, and that maybe a few dollars more than that, if you pardon the pun. But they were very shoestring. They had German money in it, and Spanish money, and Italian money. And those three entities were constantly arguing with themselves about who would pay what. They'd always be arguing or reneging on the deal and walking off the set. I mean, it was a great experience to look back on, but at the time it was kind of funny. I mean, now it's very funny. I always thought at the time, I thought this thing will either do really well or it won't do anything. Probably the latter. So I thought this thing's going to really bomb out, but I'm going to get a trip to Italy and Spain. I've never been to either place. If it did something, if the dice came up 7 or 11, I'd be it would be just a bonus deal.
We must remember that he always had a name in all three of these pictures. The Man with No Name was actually a marketing concept that somebody at United Artists came up with when they decided to bring out these three pictures in relatively close order. But in this picture, he's Blondie. Clint brought a lot of costume with him. Black jeans, which he found, just in a Levi's store somewhere. His gun belt was his rawhide gun belt. The cigars were bought near to Hollywood, across from the farmer's market, in point of fact. He wasn't a smoker, but when he did have to smoke one, he said they had a really foul taste. He said, put you in the right mood for the character. And he brought that sheepskin jacket that he wears under the serape. The serape was Sergio's. I think he bought that in Spain on the location, actually. But the sheepskin coat, which he wears quite a bit in all three of them, was Clint's addition to the costumery of this movie.
It was kind of all pieced together, and you never had duplicates and triplicates or anything in case something got lost, in case something got damaged. We had nothing. I had one hat. If I lost that hat, I was a goner. There was no way to match up to anything else. So what I did is I took my wardrobe home at night. I took it back to the hotel. I took the hat and the poncho, which we only have one of. I just kind of had to keep very, very careful track of everything, and that's about it.
I was in California making another movie, and the agent said there's a Italian director who wants to make a Western, and he wants you to be in it. I said, well, how do Italians make Westerns? Oh, he said, yeah, spaghetti western. I said, spaghetti westerns sound like Hawaiian pizza. I never heard of it. Oh, he says, he'll make a good western. He's made 2 others, A Fistful of Dollars and A Few Dollars More. So I met Leone, who was a big bear of a man. And he said, I want you to come to Italy to make the movie. He said, see a piece of my movie. And I saw the credits of one of his movies where his name appears and then a gun appears and shoots his name down. I thought, that's very interesting. It shows he has an ego, but he's willing to be shot down. So I said, yes, where do you want me? He said, I want you in Rome a month from now, and we're going to start making the movie. I arrived in Italy. The next thing I know, I'm on a horse being turned in by Clint Eastwood to get a reward for my capture because of a vicious bandit. And I had lines to learn, and I put on this costume, and there I was in the movie. And I was playing this character, Tuco.
Eli is well, he's a very, very fine actor. I was always a great admirer of his prior to doing this film with him. And I mean, even afterwards, I make it sound like afterwards. But he was just a great performer and very, very versatile actor. But he always had a tremendous amount of energy. And he just enjoyed himself immensely. He enjoyed building the character and putting it together with my character, which was much more on the stoic side. Now, I'd play my humor in more of a wry fashion. His was more I thought we made a pretty good combination.
Well, I enjoyed Clint because Clint didn't say much, but he had a great sense of observation and listening. And that's a great strength in movies. He doesn't seem to do much, but when you look up on the screen, there it is. And it's wonderful. We fly to Madrid, and we're going to shoot in the southern part of Spain in a place called Almeria. Lawrence of Arabia, they shot there. And there in southern Spain, you had the water, then you had desert, then you had mountains. So it could be very Western.
We were the only people in town that spoke English. No concierge, no our serenas, as they call them there, and it spoke English. You're just a small hotel. Everything was Italian, or Spanish, rather. And people who spoke a little Spanish got by, and if you didn't, if you ordered a milkshake, you got a potato salad. So you had to learn really quick. Sergio didn't speak any English, and I didn't speak any Italian when I first went over there. He knew goodbye, and I knew arrivederci, and that's about it.
Clint, I don't know how he communicated, but I communicated with broken French. With Leone, spoke pretty good French, and that's the way we communicated. But after a month of shooting this movie, 6 days a week, 12 to 14 hours a day, we learned to communicate. Remember the gun shop where I put the gun together? I said, Sergio, I don't know anything about guns. He said, just have fun. And what I admired about him is he let me go through the whole thing of taking a gun apart, putting it together. And I put things in like this, and I shook the thing. I did all kinds of crazy things that I had no idea were authentic. Cut, he says, good, I like that, finish.
A good movie director comes to a set early in the morning and walks the scenes through that he's going to do that day, himself, alone, so he can think and concentrate on it. Then once he's got it, he relaxes somewhat. The day is from 9 to 5, and that's it. It's not like the old days. He was so concentrated on what he wanted. I mean, there wasn't a moment of film that he printed that wasn't exactly what he wanted.
Not a lot of coverage. He sometimes would do a shot 3 or 4 times because they were so paranoid. In the early days, especially, not so much on The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, because that was a co-United Artists production and a fairly large budget. But in the early days, they'd do a couple takes because they figured the lab would screw up the first 2 or 3, or somebody would get scratched, or somebody would drop it. There was just all kind. It was a very, very haphazard crew.
Leone didn't do much directing. He knew what he wanted in his shot. He knew how to set it up. He had a wonderful cameraman named Tonino della Colli, a little man who was brilliant with a camera.
Sergio chose Tonino della Colli as cinematographer. He's undoubtedly one of the best cinematographers in Italy.
In Italy, the photographers are great. It's atavistic, dates back centuries. The talent these people have. I mean, when the Italians went into high fashion designing, they took it over. They're incredibly talented. And any church you go into in Naples, I mean, in Florence especially, or Rome, there's a masterpiece, a painting.
On the set, the actor spoke the language he knew. There's a scene with my brother. He would watch my lips. When I stopped speaking, then he would talk. And I understood enough Italian, he did it in Italian, or French, or German. Whatever language they spoke, they spoke. They didn't care if there were extraneous noises. Like you say, oh, the camera is making a little noise. They didn't care about that, just as long as the picture was clear.
You'd be doing a scene, and in your eye line off of one side of the camera or another, you'd see a couple guys back there playing Frisbee or making motions or telling jokes, and you hear people talking, and it's very, very distracting. And I just kind of forged over it. It gave me a reason to concentrate that much more intently. They just weren't used to the quietness of a set where sound is a very important feature. I'd make up a lot of stuff anyway, and so would Eli. We'd just do the scenes and whatever the intent was, and then, but you did have to keep track of it because you're going to loop it later.
There's an actor who lived in Rome named Mickey Knox, who lived in Rome. And Mickey, they gave him the job of the dubbing.
I would sit at a small moviola and go over the film or each speech back and forth, and had to fit in what I adapted in English into the lips. With Eli and Clint, it was easier than the others because they only spoke English. And many times it was good enough. I spent a whole morning on one line, just 2 words. In Italian, there's a big close-up of a guard saying to prisoners of war from the South, and they're playing while they're torturing Eli. The music is supposed to drown out the screams. At one point, they start to cry, the musicians. The line in Italian is più forte, which means louder. Well, I couldn't get it in. Più forte has 2 labials. I was stuck on it until I came back from lunch, and I thought, wait a minute, I got it.
Knox's work was very important and very effective for this reason. The sync must have been perfect. Otherwise, the American audience would look, there was no sync. And immediately the picture would be qualified as a poor picture.
The major problem that I've always had in translating and adapting scripts from Italian to English is the humor. It's different. American humor is not like Italian humor in many, many cases. I had to find the American humor and fit it into the dialogue.
It's actually a truism of movies, especially action movies, that less dialogue is more and has more of an impact. Clint was always arguing with Sergio for less dialogue. He thought that this guy should be really silent, not have any exposition whatsoever, keep his comments to almost fragmentary sentences. What little dialogue Clint has tends to be very memorable. For example, in Good, Bad, and the Ugly, when he finally comments on the carnage of the big battle at the bridge, that really zings out at you because he has up to now made no comment about the stupidity of the whole conflict. He hasn't said a word, but when he finally does speak that line, it's very potent. I think in Good, Bad, and Ugly, Clint's character is sort of mysteriously darker than he is in the others. For example, when he decides to break up his partnership with Eli, there's no particular motive for that. He just up and does it. You know, maybe there's some backstory we're not privy to, but, you know, it's a good scam they've got going. It could go on for a long time with it. And it just doesn't make much sense. On the other hand, he's also, in the later passages of the movie, more humane than he's been in his previous movies, I think. There's a little bit more range in this character.
Sergio loved long pictures. He loved long sequences and long pictures. To me, I don't mind a long picture if you've got a lot of story. But if you're just telling a long picture to produce more production value, I think you can shorten some of that down. If you have a really depthy story and you need to have that time, then that's fine. That's where he and I would differ, I suppose.
One of the reasons his pictures are so long is that he had a narrative that was difficult to break into and recut and so forth. His narrative had a smoothness to it, but it needed length because that's the way he operated. You know, he never skimped on film in the sense that, oh, I'm going to say film here and make the scene shorter. That never entered his head.
Leone had a great taste for panorama. I mean, he really loved wide open spaces, and his camera really is often very pulled back and looking at, you know, quite small figures in that landscape. But that led him toward a taste for portraiture as well. I think it's a more vivid contrast between wide and close than any other major director habitually used. I mean, it's an effect people would use in a movie, but he constantly uses it. Big, tight, big, tight. I think it does give an operatic air to his movies. Those close-ups function a little bit like arias do in operas. I mean, suddenly you're very focused on a leading player.
The Sergio, one good thing he had, he was great with faces. All those faces, those gypsies that he would use to play the Mexican guys, he didn't just say, get me 4 or 5 people to be in the background. Every one of them had to have a different look.
You have to look at the film carefully. Lee had a tip of a finger cut off. Leone adored that. He had a man with no legs. He would find different people who have suffered in life, and he would focus on that.
You know, when the townspeople were hanging Eli Wallach, there's a lot of tight close-ups of those people watching. And he makes a kind of landscape out of those faces, too. I mean, it becomes a different kind of panorama. That's almost the essence of the Leone style.
Good director should know painting, should know the famous painters or the painters that interest them, and look at them and understand what they're about. There are shots in Leone's pictures that I know were taken from some painting.
Yes, he was very, very conscious of art. He'd see a certain painting and he said, that's the lighting, and like for this sequence and that sequence. And sometimes he'd show me a picture and say, this is the kind of thing I'd like to duplicate here. But I didn't know he liked opera. I never heard him breaking into any arias of any kind. But he was a guy who was trying to become much more of a big production type director. I think he wanted to be David Lean.
Certainly, he had in his mind the work of the best directors of the world. And he thought that he was a great director himself already. And he was.
Leone had everything in his mind. I never saw him, like Orson Welles, when I worked with him. He had diagrams of the costumes and, he had with the shots. He was a terrific artist. Leone had nothing. Didn't even have a script. He never referred to a script. He knew the whole picture. It was planted in his head just as well as he knew the music. These were all dreams he had as a child. He told me, when I was a little child, I dreamed about westerns and heroes and the bad guys. And I would think of these stories, and it made my life interesting. He loved the cowboys, the West, because it had a kind of freedom to express any kind of activity you wanted, good, bad, in between.
Originally, Sergio wanted to have, for a few dollars more, he wanted to have Henry Fonda in Lee Van Cleef's part, because he felt that I had a similarity to Fonda that would have been sort of a father-son, mentor kind of situation. He couldn't get Henry Fonda, and at that time he couldn't get anybody. Nobody knew Sergio, and the dollar pictures hadn't come out. So he goes to California, and he comes back with Lee Van Cleef. I said, Lee Van Cleef, that's interesting. He always had a great face. And I used to see him around at Universal years ago. He was sort of a well-known character actor, worked quite a bit.
And Lee Van Cleef, for the first time in his life, got recognition. He was a star in Italy and made very good money due to Sergio.
I remember that Sergio's remarks was, his glance makes holes in the screen.
He was a nice man, quiet. I understand the quiet Western heroes. I don't care if they play bad men.
A lot of the best critical opinion about the Leone Westerns was that they were unconscionably violent. Looking at them today, I don't find them so. there's a lot of build-up to violence. I mean, it takes Leone an endless amount of time to get a gunfight going. I mean, you can see it at the end of Good, Bad, and Ugly. I mean, you know, those guys are circling each other in that graveyard for, I don't know, feels like about 10 minutes before there's finally an exchange of shots. So he liked to build, but once he got to the moment of violence, he was very quick with it. You know, and people are dead. Now, there are certain exceptions. The beating that Eli absorbs in the prison camp sequence in Good, Bad, and Ugly, that's pretty long and vivid and harsh. It's certainly bloody, and it's certainly, see the teeth kind of beginning to fly a little bit, but...
My wife couldn't watch that scene, nor could my kids. But I was a medic in the Army for 5 years in World War II. We were taught when soldiers get drunk, you can sober them up very quickly by putting pressure on here's the supraorbital nerve up in here. Each in your skull, there's a little opening with a nerve ending. And if you press hard on it, you'll sober up quickly. So I explained that to Leone, and I explained it to Brega, the big tough guy who's torturing me. I said, make believe you're pressing. Don't press, but make believe. So that's the way we did it. I did get a black eye because I was coming around a pole in the thing, and his fist came too close and clipped me. But as they say, it's all for the good of the movie.
Making action pictures with Italians is dangerous. They don't have the stunt players guild that we have here, which is very careful with issues of safety. It's a miracle nobody actually got hurt on any of those movies. Come right down to it.
I once said to Sergio, when are you going to put cotton in the horse's ears? I'm sitting on the horse, my hands behind my back. This noose is hanging, right? Eastwood leans back and shoots. In the rope, there's a little piece of dynamite, and it explodes, and the horse takes off. I said to Sergio, put the cotton in the horse's ears. That's what they do in Hollywood. He said, no, don't worry about that. Sure enough, Eastwood shoots, the rope breaks, the horse takes off with me on his back, with my hands tied behind him. And he doesn't want to stop. The horse has no idea that he's going to hear that damn sound again. It took me a mile before that horse stopped. I did a scene where I was lying next to a railroad track. I was handcuffed to the man who beat me a lot. And the train is coming toward me, and Leone says, Eli. He always said, Eli, I want them to see it's you. It's not a stuntman. I said, okay. So, action, the train comes. I turn this way, and as I turn, the last car goes past me, and there's a step, a metal step out coming from the car that you could step on and get on the train. And I realized that if I had raised my head 4 or 5 inches, I'd be decapitated. So he said, all right, we do it again. When I'm searching for the gold, I have to break the bag and the coins fall out. They used an acid which they poured over the bag so that when I did hit it, it would open up. There's a certain soda, Italian soda, lemon soda, that I loved. And it came in a bottle with a little white cap. So I saw it there next to the leather thing, and I grabbed it, I opened it. As soon as it touched my mouth, I knew it was not my favorite lemon drink. It was some kind of poison. The first thing I did was spit. I was furious. And I said to Leone, I'm not going to shoot anymore today. Now, Leone wasn't trying to kill me because I hadn't finished the film yet. Oh, Eli, they ordered milk, and I drank a quart of milk to neutralize what the acid was. And then I did the scene.
All directors doing historical films make big claims about authenticity. And Leone did. He said, I read all these books about, for example, the prison camp. I mean, he read up a lot on Andersonville. He read up on such history as there was of the Civil War as it was fought in Texas. And there was apparently one minor engagement, nowhere near as spacious as the one that he's giving us. But I also never really believe directors when they talk about authenticity of a historical kind. I mean, it's not their major business. All a historical film has to be is kind of plausible in terms of its details. And plausibility that's significant is emotional plausibility.
In the old Westerns that I grew up with, Hugh Gibson and Jack Holt, Gene Autry and those people, they never dressed the way you saw them dress in this movie. Never.
When I was at his house, I said, where did you dream up the idea of those long coats, down to the ankles? He said, I'll show you. And he had an American book of the West, and there was a picture of cowboys wearing dusters. Well, of course, they were always in the dust, the rain, and they covered their whole bodies. He also had a shot in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly with a train pulling out. It was an authentic train by that period. In Spain, they had them. And at the end of the train, the last train, had a cannon projecting out of it. I said, where the hell did you dream that up? He said, I'll show you. And there it was in a book about the Civil War.
1/3 of that movie deals with the Civil War in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. He took a book by Matthew Brady, which dealt with photos that Matthew Brady took during the Civil War. And if you see there's a scene where a train is pulling into a station and a man is on the cow catcher in the front with his arms spread, he says, I'm a Confederate spy. And you know they're going to kill him. There's a scene where a group of soldiers marching with a man, they lay a coffin down, they line up and they shoot him and he falls in the coffin. All of those came authentically from what Leone's research showed him.
They took a little bit of license, but he tried the best he could. He's very, very innovative. They made replicas in Spain and what have you, and so they got a lot of equipment, Gatling guns and things like that.
And all the cannons and guns and all what came from the military museum in Spain. And they were authentic Union Army and Rebel Army equipment.
I think the budget on this picture was about 4 times what he'd had on Fistful. He had some room for spaciousness in this movie that he hadn't previously had.
Was partially shot in Almeria, not totally. Was part in Almeria and part in the north of Spain, where was the bridge, for instance, or the battles. But the Spanish army was helpful all over the film. For the battle scenes, the Spanish government was helpful in any way they could.
Clint said, listen, this is my 3rd Italian movie. I'll give you tips. Don't get involved in anything dangerous. So he guided me in a way. He was my mentor. He took care of me in this movie. And I liked that.
Well, yeah, well, there was a few things. I was maybe a little more cynical about some of the looseness, let's say, about the shooting. We were shooting this 200-meter bridge, and it was an actual bridge. In the States nowadays, you at least have balsa wood or certain fake rocks. This was an actual bridge, and they just loaded the thing with dynamite. The Spanish army did.
Clint said to Leone, where do you want us? Leone said, well, I have a camera here, and one right near the bridge. That's where you are.
And they said, well, yeah, we have so many hundreds of pounds of dynamite in this bridge. And I'm going, So I turned around, and Eli's kind of going, what do you think? You think we should do this? And I said, Sergio, where are you going to be?
Oh, I'm up on the hill with that camera. And Clint says, that's where we're going to be, up on that hill with that camera.
He was going to be back up the hill overseeing the whole thing. And I said, maybe that's where we should be too. So Eli and I went up on top of the hill where they do this. So I've got this golf club. I've got a pitching wedge, and I'm sitting, just for practice, I'm just sitting there swinging it, just to kind of something to do. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this whole bridge just goes wham, like that. And I said, oh my God, they must. We all turned, and Eli says, I think they must have been filming. And I said, yeah. I said, they probably didn't have the camera running. Anytime you're ready, CB, I did one of those jokes. I started getting kind of cynical, and we started laughing. And all of a sudden, there's silence, and all of a sudden I hear just screaming and yelling and screaming and yelling. And so we start walking down, and here comes Sergio up the road, and he's got, and he is red. I mean, he is not just, he is red, his face. He's absolutely going crazy with every swear word there is in Italian and any other language he might have known. We found out afterwards what had happened is because the Spanish army had built the bridge, they decided they were going to let the Spanish captain have the honor of blowing up the bridge. So when the cameras were adjusting, one of the cameramen behind him was saying they were saying, ready, good, good, good. And so they were saying vai, vai, meaning okay, and ready. And he goes, vai, vai. So the Spanish captain, who knew nothing about movies, he just sat there and he just says, oh, vai. Boom, and the whole thing went up. Not a camera rolling. Down where we would have been was really kind of a tricky area to be in. But it was the first time I'd ever heard the "Anytime You're Ready" CB joke played out loud. We went down to Almeria to another location for 3 weeks, and when we came back, they had rebuilt the bridge. The Spanish people, the captain, the army felt so bad they rebuilt it for nothing, and we blew it up again. This time with the special effects man, Italian special effects man on the trigger.
I think this movie is very moral. When we come to the end of the movie, the vastness of that cemetery, I mean, the amount of lives that are just wasted in this cemetery that stretches to the farthest horizon of his introductory shots of it. I think there's a moral there. I mean, it's a standard moral. It's about greed and what we will do for a few dollars more. We really don't want the Lee Van Cleef character, who has been presented as a really evil guy, a thoroughly evil guy without any redeeming virtue. We don't want him to get away with the money. We actually kind of want Eli most of all to have it, because he's worked so hard and he's been so crazy in pursuit of it. And I suppose we want Clint to have it because you wouldn't quite call him a moral figure, but he's always the objective figure. He's a little bit stepped back from the scurry of the action. And then at the ultimate moment, he will step forward and resolve the action in a way that's morally satisfying to us. That whole character is, I think, a very significant statement. The films were popular when they came out in the United States. What has happened with them over the course of 40 years is that people have begun to take them seriously as a form of artistic expression. For all their grandiosity and operatic qualities, these are movies that speak to my understanding of human nature.
I'm curious about why this has become such a cult movie, but they show it every 2 months all over the United States. It's kept my career going. People say to me, I didn't know he was still alive. I didn't know he was still here. And I think, yeah, I'm still here.
I'm not one that kind of revisits films. That's kind of what I'd like to do with that picture. I'd like to sit down sometime, run the DVD, and just sit quietly and kind of have a little nostalgic moment. The adventure in Spain, it was all a wonderful experience.
Leone had a big quarrel with them here because he wanted his movie to be shown in toto. They said, no, it's three hours or more. You want to get the audience in and get them out. Show it again and again and again. So he had to cut about 25 minutes, and it riled him.
He certainly did not like it, but then he was convinced by United Artists that that was a way of making the film more acceptable by the American audience.
It's a dying art, the film stuff. Not many people understand it anymore. Not many people try and even make it better. I own Triage Lab, my partner Tony Monroe and I. We specialize in photochemical restoration, and we handle obsolete formats. The project came through us through John Kirk at MGM. He was talking to me one day about Technoscope. He wanted to do the work with us, and when he found out that we could handle the format, he did. Technoscope is a two-perf process devised by Technicolor in the late 1950s. It allowed producers and directors and cinematographers to shoot an anamorphic image without the cumbersome CinemaScope lenses. They were able to use a wide variety of flat lenses to do that, including zoom lenses. The depth of field was better. It was also cheaper to use because stock costs were cut in half and the processing was cut in half. Technicolor would convert it to an anamorphic image, which played as normal CinemaScope in the theaters. Technoscope is obsolete. It's very difficult to find a laboratory that understands how it works. It's very time-consuming. It all has to be done by eye. The earlier scanoptic lenses could be soft. We use a lens that sits behind a Nikon primary lens that we actually have the ability to focus both the horizontal and the vertical axis of that lens, which gives a superior image. We can definitely make the Technoscope look better now than it looked when it was in the theaters.
In order for Triage to do this version of the film, I ordered a print to be made from the Italian version, which is the complete version, basically. So they used this Italian print as their reference guide to make sure that they were getting everything in and that it would match the music and effects and the rest of the dialogue.
We had to editorially conform pretty much everything. The biggest challenge was basically staying in sync. In particular, in the very last scene of the picture, Eli Wallach runs out yelling at Clint, "I know who you are." It was entirely out of sync. And it was entirely out of sync in the versions that were done in the 1980s. And we had to go through all the elements and find that shot. John had a conformed track, and he had Eli Wallach and Clint Eastwood come in and redo lines of shots that had been cut out of the American version.
The reason that I needed to bring in Clint Eastwood, Eli Wallach, and other actors to do their lines in English for this version was that for the original release, it was cut for the English language version before the actors went into the studios in New York to do the English language dub. So these scenes had never been dubbed before. Otherwise, we could have just pulled them out and added them in, and their voices would have sounded the same. That's why I brought them in and had them do the lines. Even though, obviously, Clint Eastwood and Eli Wallach sound a little bit older, I felt it was important to use their voices as opposed to trying to get someone to really imitate what they would have sounded like a long time ago. The first ADR session that we did was in October of 2002. Then a few weeks later, after the first of the year, we brought in the other actors. We found a wonderful actor, Simon Prescott, who did Lee Van Cleef's voice, and some other actors who did the rest. And those were all done in a period of just a couple of days. I felt like that as long as we were going to be fixing up the picture, that we needed to do something about the sound as well. I think audiences today are used to having a bigger, fuller sound, particularly for a movie like this, which is obviously an epic and widescreen, and it would have sounded, I think, rather hollow had we left it in just the old mono. Some of it was very easy to do, but some of it was a little harder. The sound effects and the music were unfortunately on the same track. Also, when we were trying to spread the sound, you can't copy a sound from the front of the screen and put it at the back at the same time without having what they call a phasing problem. So we did have to sometimes add an effect like an explosion or a gunshot or something that wasn't in the original, just in order to avoid having that sound problem. And it also was necessary just because of the fact we were doing a 5.1. When you go into that realm, it changes the quality of the sound. If we had left some of the sound effects the way that they were in the original, they would have sounded awful compared to the dialogue and the music. When I was looking for elements, I was made aware that there were a lot of scenes that didn't end up even in the Italian version. I thought, well, as long as I'm looking for elements, why not? Let's look around. Some of them appeared to have been lost or stolen, or we weren't able to find those. But I did find a couple of them. And one of the scenes I did elect to put back into the film. It was the scene where Tuco goes to the cave to recruit the 3 banditos. I did find out that the scene was shown in the original Roman premiere of the film and then was cut for the Italian version. So I didn't feel like I was putting in something that had never been there. I think taking that scene out created a continuity problem in the film because up to that point, Tuco was alone, and then all of a sudden you see him coming into town to this hotel with these 3 banditos, and you think, well, where on earth did those guys come from? So I felt like it was important to put that in. I did also find a complete version of the scene that I call the Tuco torture sequence. In the full-length version, that sequence runs about 2.5 minutes longer than it does in either the Italian or the English language original version. And the reason for that was the original negative was damaged. So in order to even save the sequence, they had to go in and recut around the footage that had been damaged. Everyone just thought that was lost. But then when the Cineteca Nazionale started their restoration, they came across a print that did have the complete sequence in it. But unfortunately, it looked so bad that I thought trying to put that into the rest of the body of the film, which looked so good, it would have thrown the audience out of the moment. You would just be shocked by how bad it looked. So I elected to leave that out.
The fun part of the project was taking something that wasn't good and making it so it looks really good. Theatrically, it's spectacular. It came out far better than we expected.
The reaction that I've gotten so far to this version has basically been good. I think most people who see it really like seeing it again on a big screen with the sound and with the extra footage put back in.
Certainly what is on the screen is what Sergio liked and what Sergio wanted. I'm sure that if Sergio saw the edited scenes or knew of the addition of these scenes, would love it.